Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Five Questions with the Paulist Fathers. And today, all the way out in Berkeley, California, where it's not as hot as it is in the rest of the West Coast, is Father Steve Bossi. Father Steve, how are you?
I'm really fine. Doing great after I hear stories of people in my hometown of Seattle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like 114 there today, isn't there?
Something like that. It's pretty terrible. I know my family is, fortunately, they have AC, so they're doing okay.
Good. Glad to hear it. Hey, let's get right into it with question one. In this past year, what's one thing in the way you've had to minister to others out in Berkeley that you think you'll most remember?
The main thing I think that I will remember from this COVID time was the difficulty of knowing how to minister to people. You never were quite sure. Should I be personally present? Can I touch them? Our sacraments are built a lot around physical contact. Whether we're giving communion or blessing people. And so I was going to tell you a quick story. I got a call from a guy who was dying, and he asked me to come over, and he wanted the sacrament of sick. And of course, I went over, but I didn't know, quite what to expect. And question was, do I need to wear a mask? Should he have a mask on? It was a difficult time to try to know just how to handle the situation, given the fact that this was all new to us, and we were dealing with things that we had not dealt with before in quite this way.
Yeah, it was really a rough go of it. And question two, you've always had a heart for the care for creation. And so, what was the biggest challenge in moving your masses from inside the church to out in the patio during the pandemic?
We're very fortunate here at Newman because when this building was built, the upper floor was created as an outdoor patio area, probably for student parties, I would figure. I mean, whoever designed it had something like that in mind. And so they had built in a number of planters. And so we have up there on the patio, we have trees, we have whole planters full of rosemary growing. And so it created a wonderful outdoor atmosphere. And sometimes when I was presiding there at Mass, I would remember that I've led several tours to the Holy Land. And this is where Jesus gathered with his disciples, was under trees. This is what he did because it was a hot place and you did not want to be out under the hot sun all the time. And so what you would do is you would sit under a tree. And uh, it was interesting how the the atmosphere was both the physical presence of the sort of the umbrella of the trees around us, but it also was the physical presence and the, I guess I could say, natural or alive presence of the birds that for whom that was their home. And when we would start preaching, the birds would start squawking, and it was really great. And you knew that they were irritated by the fact that we were in their territory and interrupting their communication. The bad part of it was, of course, it was outdoors, and so you had street noise. And we happened to be on a street that's very commonly used by the fire department, and so sometimes you just had to stop everything and let the noise go by, and then we could pick up again.
And my main point,
Exactly. That's
Father Steve, question three. Now people are starting to return. What's one sign of hope in the last month or so at Holy Spirit that you've seen that's really bringing you hope?
you know. I guess I would say it's people's eagerness to get back together. People have felt isolated from one another, even though that they could watch our sacraments or our mass on live stream on the computers. There was a longing to be together with other people, And as we've begun now to open the doors of the church and have Mass there, you see people eagerly connecting with one another, and the joy on their faces of seeing the people with whom they used to sit at Mass, and going back to their seats that they always sat in before. It was like coming home. And the significant thing about this is, if you read the Acts of the Apostles, you read the letters of St. Paul, what was he talking about? He was talking about community a lot of the time, encouraging people to get along with one another and to support one another. Well, that's what we find here, is people wanted that, and they wanted to be together with other people who share their faith. And so this time has been very, very interesting to watch, and the reality of people eager to get back to church and be able to sit and pray with other people has been wonderful.
Yeah, what we all hoped for, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so question 4, throughout the pandemic, was there a favorite comfort food or Netflix movie or something along those lines that gave, that kind of got you through all of that?
I'm not a person who watches movies on TV very much, but this was an opportunity for me to spend time checking up on what's available there. And what I found was that several of the nominees for Best Picture with the Academy Awards were available on Netflix. And so I made a point to watch several of them. And one of them that I watched was The Trial of the Chicago 7.
Oh, that was great.
It was a wonderful movie. And it took me back to a very important moment in my own life, because in 1968, when that all took place, I had just returned from 2 years in India as a Peace Corps volunteer.
Right.
And I'd come back to an environment where here's my country that I'm representing so proudly across the world. And yet here are people just ready to tear each other's hair out. I mean, there was the anger and the fighting over Vietnam, over Nixon, over the whole environment was such a polarized one that it was fascinating to watch that movie. It was wonderful that I had the opportunity to do that. We also, I should add, that speaking of food, we had to change the way we deal with food in our house, because we normally have a cook who comes in and prepares a main meal for at least a couple of the meals, one of the meals a day,
Right.
so that we can at least make sure we have at least a time when, as a community, we can sit down together and not be worried about what we're bringing out and all of that. Well, of course, we couldn't do that during the COVID. She couldn't come in because it was not safe for her or for us. So I found a restaurant here in the neighborhood. Donato's was a Italian restaurant, and oftentimes on Sundays they would make a meal that you could then prepare at home. So they would give you all the fixings, everything you needed, and they would give you instructions on how to do it.
Okay.
We're very fortunate in our house to have Stephen Bell,
I was just going to say that.
and so I would just hand them the makings to Steve, and I'd hand him the instructions, and he'd go for it. We had some terrific Italian food during those days.
Terrific Italian food made by a Southerner from the United States, right?
That's right.
Which is great. That's great. And finally, question 5. It's been over a year now since you lost your dear friend, Father Rich Colgan, and a friend of all of us to the virus. Looking back now, since it's been a year, how did that friendship most impact your life and maybe your priesthood?
Rich and I really became very good friends. We were stationed together 3 different places, and Rich had a unique quality of optimism and of seeing the good in people. And I always saw that as a true gift. And so the time we spent together always was a time where we would talk about situations and things. And here was Rich always calling me to the better way of looking at it. Um, I got to know Rich pretty well. In fact, I went to Ellenburg, where his family was from, when his father died, and I was there for the funeral. And so I stayed a few extra days, and Rich drove me around and showed me where he grew up and the farm that his family had. And it was fascinating and wonderful. And all of this struck me as formative of the kind of person that Rich became. Uh, what an amazing man that I never heard an angry or critical remark from him. Uh, and so it was just a wonderful influence in my life. You know, some of those places where he and I were stationed together were very, very difficult. I often felt deeply criticized, and people challenging me about this or that. And Rich was always there to say, well, think about it this way. And what a gift. And so I miss him terribly.
Yeah, we all do. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was part of the first focus group when we talked about doing a national young adult ministry outreach, which now we know is Busted Halo, right?
Yes, yeah.
He was part of that first focus group, and I just remember being tremendously impressed with all the stuff he brought to that from Boston when he was in Boston, and he just kept talking about, well, young adults in Boston look at it this way, and yeah, it just really contributed to everybody's sense that young adults aren't the same everywhere, and I think Rich had a really good gift of seeing that, and no matter where he was always able to connect with people.
Yes, he was. That's right. Um, we traveled together from time to time, and you know what? When you're on vacation and traveling, there are always stresses. But with which I was able to laugh about it, and we were able to make the best of it. And it was that wonderful gift of affirmation and optimism. Um, Truly a gift as a minister. And so I really felt blessed by my years with Rich.
I'm sure that he, just like the rest of us, have been blessed by you too, Father Steve. And so we're glad that you're doing well out there in Berkeley. And this has been 5 Questions with Paulist Fathers. I'm Mike Hayes. He's Father Steve Bossi. He's out in Berkeley, California at Holy Spirit Parish. Stop by and see him if you're out that way. And hey, Father Steve, stay cool, okay?
Oh, thank you. You do the same.
All right. Take care, everybody. We'll see you again soon.